Hello, everybody. Welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. And today we're going to take a look at a piece from the actual April issue of the journal Seashores from poet John Hawkhead with the first line of Funeral Mass. So, with that said, sit back, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's haiku. Okay, welcome back. We have a nice poem here by John Hawkhead, again from the April issue of Seashores. I don't know if that's really visible or not, but anyway, you get the point. It's a print journal. Comes out a couple times a year. Really good work in this journal. And this piece, it's one of these pieces where you come across it and you are surprised that a poet has captured something so specific out of your own life that it's kind of eerie. And this does happen. The more of these poems you read, the more you encounter, the more you're going to run into something that is almost ripped right out of your own life. And that can be kind of freaky. And so this will be kind of a more personal episode in this regard, as I kind of explain the connection I have with this poem and just how amazing that kind of is. So let's take a look at the piece. The poem goes like this. Funeral Mass. Silence fills a light shaft of incense. Funeral Mass. Silence fills a light shaft of incense. It's a really nice piece all by itself, even if I don't have some sort of connection to it. But, man, this hits home. We'll get into that in just a minute. To start, let's take a look at the structure. We see that it follows the fragment and phrase, with line 1, Funeral Mass, being our fragment, and our phrase being lines 2 and 3, Silence fills a light shaft of incense. Very nice. And let's break things down. So, first line is Funeral Mass. Funeral Mass. And very specific, puts you into a moment, a point in time that, like it or not, we're all going to experience at some point. Maybe it's not a mass, but some sort of funeral ceremony, some sort of celebration ceremony, a ceremony where you say goodbye to a loved one who has passed on. And it's great. You know, it's a good fragment, a good first line. It definitely pulls you into a place in your life. And it lets you know right off the bat that it's going to have a tone to it. You know, for me, funeral mass specifically, it's not a funeral celebration. It's not a this or that. It is a mass. So it is a religious ceremony. And that sets a tone for what comes next. Line 2, silence fills a light shaft. Silence fills a light shaft. Really beautiful. So not only do we have a location that we're in, a tone and a mood with that first line, now the next thing that we get after Funeral Mass is silence. So it's definitely a bit of, we now have a sound quality and an auditory presence to this. And the silence is filling something. What is it filling? It's filling a light shaft, which is interesting. How does silence fill a light shaft? Well, it can't in the real sense of a light, because a light shaft isn't something that really can be filled with sound. However, you can have a moment where you have a shaft of light present, and silence can certainly surround that mood, surround that moment, and bring something that might have been noisy into a focal point of silence. And I think that's what's happening here. That's what's happening for me. And then we get to that third line of incense. Of incense. And incense, at least in Catholic masses, Catholic funeral masses, is something that is lit. It's a spice of some sort. It's a little cake disc, charcoal type disc. Anyway, I was raised Catholic and got to light that as an altar boy in my youth. So you light the incense stick and the incense disc, and it goes into this really cool little baskety thing, and the priest moves around the casket with the incense, doing a blessing of the body of the person that's passed on. And of course, the incense, as you know, it's smoke. And so what we have here with the full thing of 2 and 3 lines together, that phrase, it's a light shaft of incense. So in other words, you see the smoke going up, and it has captured light. It has captured light coming through either from the ceiling or from a stained glass window of some sort. And it, as this blessing is happening, as the incense has been lit, everything goes silent for that moment, for this moment in this poem, in that John Hawkhead has captured. And it's just, something that happens at funeral masses. I've been to many in my life, both as a kid serving and at masses, as well as having loved ones pass on. And this summer, as I'd stated in a previous episode, my mother did pass away, and she, had a Catholic mass for her, and there was incense, and this exact moment happened just as it's presented here, just as it's presented. And I went right to my mom's funeral, just fresh in my head. Obviously, it didn't happen that long ago. And it's just amazing how well it captured this moment in my life. So perfectly, so succinctly, so beautifully. And what a gift it was to run across this poem and to feel this and find this and to go back to this moment that I just experienced not long ago, and to have it be right before me and written in a way that I haven't been able to write, a moment of time that I wouldn't have thought to capture. For me, if I was going to capture it, it would be probably more of a senru, because my mom always hated the incense at funeral masses. She hated the idea, she just did not like the smell of the Catholic incense. And the priest went around once, and there were 2 priests we had the pastor of the church, and we had another priest that was closer to the family that was there. So the first priest that was kind of doing the mass, that was close to the family, went and did a blessing around my mom once, and then the pastor of the church that was in went around again, and my dad tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Gosh, he hated that incense, boy." And we had a good little chuckle in the middle of the church about my mom getting double the incense, which she really would have just not liked at all. And so that's something that haiku can do and does very well. And that's why it's important for the moments that you're capturing in your own work not to be so tied to you, the poet. But you want to capture the moment and present it as real and honest as possible. And when you're using simple, succinct, and suggestive language, and you're thinking about word choice, and you're using structures, you're setting a moment, building a moment, taking the reader in, engaging their senses, the moment becomes the reader's. And it's such a key element to haiku and senryu. And it's something that is among the harder things to learn, to do, if you're starting to work in this form. Because so much of everything else that you will write is centered around the artist's, the writer's own experience and perception. The artist or the writer speaking his or her own truth and presenting or speaking on behalf of somebody else specifically to present that truth. But in this instance, in these forms, when I always say when I'm doing my job as a haiku poet, you don't see me in the poem. You should only see you. And you might be amazed to think like, wow, how did he come to this? But you shouldn't be trying to figure out what the poet is doing or what happened to them. But try to connect it to something in your life. Try to connect it to something real. Again, don't necessarily look to other lines of other fiction, other stories outside of your own experience. And sometimes there's an allusion to another thing or another work of literature or art or somewhat. But here, John gifted me a moment from my own life. There's no way he could set out to do that if he was trying to write about something so specific of his. And so keep that in mind when you're writing your own work or when you're reading work, is that you pick up a book of haiku and senryu not to figure out the poet or what the poet's trying to tell you. You pick up a book of haiku and senryu to learn about your own life. Take a trip to places you might not have been but can imagine, and maybe get smacked right dab in the middle of the places you have been and have experienced and have felt, and experience them with your own eyes, with your own senses, with your own point of view. And that's what's, when these things click and these things work, that's exactly what they do. They pull you in and give you, and you're in this moment. And it unfolds before you in the present tense, in real time, and then it leaves you at the end of the moment to take it wherever it takes you. For me, I went and thought about my mom not liking incense and how funny that was, and the little joke my dad had and I had at church while that was happening. That's outside of the poem, but this poem put me in the moment to where I experienced that. It's a wonderful thing. It's magical. It's one of the reasons why I focus so exclusively on these two forms and only these two forms. Not only am I so enriched by all of these poems that I read. This journal has tons of poems in there, haiku and senryu. But they're also fun and challenging and really worthwhile to write because you're really focusing on, your lens as a writer becomes not your life, but it becomes what's happening around you. It becomes what it means, what it is to be human on this planet and interact with the natural world or interact with other human characteristics or characters as you do in senryu. And it shifts your focus, shifts it away from me, and it shifts it to we. And that's a beautiful thing. Thanks, John. Thanks, Seashores. And thank you for tuning in, as always. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you. Hope everything's okay in your life, in your world. And tune again next time. Like and subscribe, all the things. If not, that's okay too. You made it here, you made it to the end, and that's awesome. Thanks. Till next time.